So, one of the main reasons I started this podcast was to tell people's stories. That's why it's always been mostly interview based, because I love stories. And I feel like I see the hand of God in other people's lives and it grows my faith. And so that was why I started this. And yes, a lot of the time the conversation turns more logical or theological. But at the end of the day, I really believe in the power of stories, which is why I really love today's episode. Hannah Morgan is a wife, she's a mom, she's the author of her new memoir called The Vial, and she's also a survivor. She experienced a pretty severe adverse vaccine reaction in high school, and as a result, much of her life has been a journey of recovery, of faith, of desperation, crying out to God, giving up, finding victory, and everything in between. She's also a bit of a nerd, self-proclaimed. That's not derogatory. And so she also has this passion for education and advocacy about the possibilities with vaccines. Everybody pretty much knows where I stand on that issue, but it was really interesting to have a conversation with someone who is educated, who has the experience, and the way she walks through the conversation was just really inspiring to me. And so, if you love stories, if you love seeing the hand of God move in other people's lives, if you love learning from their experiences, and or if you're a nerd and love learning about vaccines, you're going to love this episode. Hannah, welcome to the Speakeasy.
Thanks for having me on, Blake.
It's so cool. You were saying before we started recording, you've been listening to the show for years. And so I'm really excited. Those are honestly can be really fun people to sit down and have these conversations with, because you know how this works. You know we're going to go there. And you know we're going to talk about all the things and chase all the rabbits, and it's going to be great.
It is.
So you wrote a memoir, which that's a lot. Oh, I mean, first of all, writing a book, period, is a lot of work. But there's something about it being that really personal story that can be a little daunting and a little difficult. And then you wrote it about something that's highly controversial and gets politicized a lot. And that is essentially your adverse reaction to the Gardasil vaccine. But that's not the whole story. This is not a book that's just about adverse reactions. It's so much more than that. And so I would love to hear a little bit of your story and how that turned into The Vial coming to be.
Awesome. Yes. So it's interesting because this is now 12 years after I had my adverse reaction to the HPV vaccine. And so growing up, I followed the full CDC schedule. Ironically, the Gardasil vaccine was the only one that my parents ever hesitated on because it came out in 2006. And it was for a sexually transmitted disease coming from a Christian household that was very talked about in our church of, well, should we really be getting this vaccine if we're encouraging our children to wait till marriage and all of that? And so my parents pushed it off for a little bit. Ultimately, the doctor that I had was very respectful, but just saying, "Hey, we do try to give this vaccine before someone's or sexually active, since it is a sexually transmitted disease. We want to help prevent that on the front end." And so, for whatever reason, after years of hearing about it, my mom did decide to get it for me, and never thought anything of it. But within 24 hours, I'd actually collapsed in my family's mudroom because I had such shooting abdominal pains going through my body. And I started living at the medicine cabinet for
Mm.
ibuprofen because I was having migraines every day. And I wasn't thinking anything of it. It's just, okay, I got up for school. I went, popped ibuprofen, went for a long day of school, came home, took some more, studied for 5 hours because I always was super into my schooling, and then just did it day after day. And the fatigue was so extreme that my mom was wondering, okay, is this a teenage phase? But I had always been such an optimistic teen, loving life, loving school, loving sports, that it was very out of character. But what really stood out to my mom when she decided, okay, this is not just a 17-year-old going through a phase, is I joked that the way that I avoided high school drama was that I'd come home after school and I'd sit down with my mom at the table and I'd just say, "Hey, this is what's going on." And then I didn't have to talk to any about of my friends about other people and get in that muddy water.
That's
I just
amazing.
talk to my mom, avoid seriously, best way to avoid school drama. And so one day I was having a conversation, I fell asleep mid-sentence. And so my mom called my grandma and she goes, "This is not a phase." She fell asleep talking to me. And so there's a lot of layers here, but to kind of give the short of it is those symptoms started within 24 hours of the excruciating abdominal pains, the migraines, and the fatigue. And then within 2 months, I thought I had mono because I was so sick. I was feeling all this heaviness in my body, having a hard time waking up. So it started this frequent visits to the pediatrician where I was going at least 3 times a week, where I'm getting sent off to all these specialists. Some are encouraging and kind, others, it's funny. I had no perspective at the time because I was starting to get so sick. I was struggling to string thoughts together. Almost right at the 4 month mark, I developed syncope. So I was frequently passing out. So this progressed to I was originally supposed to be the number 1 seed on our girls golf team. I The first time I passed out was the morning of a tournament. I had no idea that I would never step foot on a golf course again for that season. So my teammate and I, we were supposed to be the first 4-year letter winners for my high school. It was something that I had pursued all these years and was excited about and just had that snatch. I mean, this all happened. The syncope was, that was the week before or days before my senior year of high school. So, and then I'm being shuttled around to all these specialists, and some are being kind, but they don't know what's going on. And then another doctor, I was so out of it, but he thought I had conversion disorder, which basically means it's all in your head. You have hysteria. So my
Mm.
mom plays mama bear and tells the nurse, "You need to take Hannah into the waiting room and choose out this doctor,"
Good for
going,
mom. Go
"You do not
mom.
understand. This is the most optimistic child I've ever had. Like, she's had all these aspirations. This is not a teenager with anxiety or depression." And because he sent in a psychiatrist, she's telling me about meditation apps. And I remember sitting there going, I'm I'm not an my default is an anxiety. And so I said, I'm just stressed because I'm so sick and I don't know what's going on. And so anyway, she didn't tell me about that until years later. And so we still laugh about that. But it just became this game where or situation where I ended up having to do homebound instruction for my senior year of high
Mm.
school. So it got to the point where I was on the couch, sick, disoriented, dizzy, and my day was my mom usually, walking me to the bathroom. Like, that was my physical activity, and I was still passing out at least 5 times a day, and that was the only movement I was getting. I mean, when I say I've easily passed out over 1,000 times in this whole situation and over the years. And so my friends were applying for colleges, and I
Mm.
had all these dreams and goals, and teachers, I have some family in Wisconsin, so my whole life goal, like this giant goal, is I'm going to go to the University of Wisconsin one day. And I'd have these teachers and they'd say, "You're excelling in my class. I'm going to get you to that, the University of Wisconsin." And then all of a sudden I'm on the couch. I'm getting I see these assignments because I did get a homebound instructor that started coming to the house, which was so talk about stripping away layers of who a person is. I had always performed very well in school, so I had over a 4.0 GPA, and at the time, I didn't really know that, there was an option besides going to school for however many hours, coming home, studying for 5 hours straight, taking a shower, going to bed, doing it all over the next day. I was always so committed to learning the material and excelling on my exams. And so we just got in this situation where I'm having this homebound instructor get assigned, and she's telling me, "You need to drop your AP classes. You need to go down
Mhm.
to bare minimum." And I'm just wanting I mean, oh, I could barely string thoughts together, and I am
You're like trying to
dragging my
take AP
heels.
classes. Yeah.
Yes! I'm like, "No, you cannot tell me this." And then I finally the one that I did win out on was I said, "I'm not dropping physics, like, because you needed physics for to graduate with honors." I said, "I will give up all my classes except AP Government." I mean, there were so many people that right place, right time. My neighbor was my AP Government teacher. He'd come over once a week, sit down with me, walk through the
Oh.
material. There were so many amazing things. My homebound instructor was this cross of my 2 grandmas, her personality, and she is this I mean, so she's an older lady, and well, I think she studied math, like, she majored in math at a time where, like, she was the only woman taking those classes, and so she had this unique perspective, and she'd share about, when people don't believe in you, just push through, follow your
Mm.
passions, all these things that even though I was at this point of so defeated because I felt like everything was getting stripped from me and, people are going one of the beautiful things in this story is that I actually met my husband 1 week before I got sick. So he walked this entire journey with me. And one of the sweet things that he did was he had all our friends go stand out like with their stomachs painted for homecoming. And
Oh.
it's funny because I put this it's so sweet. It's so like, young high school thing to do. But I'm standing at the front door, I almost pass out, thankfully I didn't, and I'm just in my brain like, "Oh, how can I still go?" And "Oh, I can go with mom and get a dress," and my husband looked at me, he's like, "Well, I don't think you can actually go, but I didn't want you to feel left out." And so little things like that where, I mean, if people are looking for a really sweet love story,
For
that is
real.
definitely woven in here. This guy who we were both 17 and I couldn't go to school. I couldn't do Friday night football games or apply to colleges or all that and still you know, stuck with me through that whole process. And so what ended up happening is, I reached this point that my neighbor came over to my mom and said, "Hey, Hannah, her health history, it's so similar to what one of my friends is going through with her daughter, and they traced it back to the Gardasil vaccine. Did Hannah have that?" Well, my mom didn't even remember if I had it or not. So she calls the pediatrician's office and says, "Hey, can you check her file?" And so there's a pause and then they come back and they say, "Yeah, she had it in April." And so my mom said, "Okay, well, can you leave a message for my doctor, her pediatrician, to call me back? We're wondering, her symptoms started within a day of that vaccine. We're wondering if this is related." So my mom leaves that message, no call back.
Of
So
course
then my
not.
mom calls again and says,
I
"Hey,
love
I'm
your
trying to
mom.
get
I
a hold."
love your
Oh,
mom.
I know. Well, my mom did some mama bear things. That is in there for sure. And she called again, no answer, but hey, we can take your message. And then weeks go by. So I had been at the same pediatrician or pediatric office my entire childhood. And the head of the practice, who is my pediatrician from birth, called my mom 3 weeks later because like I said, I had been going in 3 times a week. And so he said, "Hey, Hannah hasn't been in 3 weeks. What's going on?" And what my mom said, "Well, Dr. Brady, I reached out. I've been trying to get a hold of Dr. Copper about we think this might be related to the HPV vaccine." And he tells my mom, "Well, I see you sent in a 20-page packet highlighted with notes detailing how Hannah's case matches severe adverse reaction to the Gardasil vaccine." My mom tells him, "I never sent those papers." So here, through speculation, what we think happened is Dr. Copper put in my medical file a 20-page packet highlighted with notes of all the ways my symptoms matched the reportings for a severe adverse reaction and was refusing to call us back. And so, naturally, Dr. Brady is backpedaling.
Yeah.
And so he ends up doing what, more respectfully, the neurologist said. He goes, "Well, my mom," because he's saying, "Well, okay, we need to rule out conversion disorder first." which is hysteria. And my mom goes, "Excuse me, you have known my daughter since she was only a couple days old. We both know this is not conversion
It's
disorder.
ruled out. Like, we
It's
can go
been
ahead and
ruled out.
shelf
I've
it.
seen all these specialists, I've been to all these appointments, had a bunch of scans. It's not that." And so he ends up agreeing to send in the report because at first he wanted my mom to do it. And she said, "I hope you were." This is one of my funny things that I wasn't there for, but my mom telling me back, she told him, "You better have been taking notes because you're sending in that adverse report." And so I don't know the exact time frame because I was sick, but we did receive a letter in the mail that he had submitted a severe adverse reaction to the Gardasil vaccine. But then we didn't hear from him. So I'm senior year on my couch, losing, I'm seriously wasting away. I mean, pounds, everything. And now I'm out a pediatrician who was previously seeing me 3 times a week and was kind, was encouraging. She'd write things on my reports like, "We're gonna get to the bottom of this. Like this, your pelvic ultrasound came back all good," and she'd write a smiley face on the report and stuff like that. But there were no answers,
Well, and
and
then
so
we
it was.
finally do kind of get down to the
Mhm,
root, and it's radio silence.
absolutely.
I keep thinking about it through the perspective of your mom too. Like, I know that this is largely written, obviously from your perspective, but now as a parent, and I'm sure for you as well, like your experience is so awful, right? Like, you're wasting away, you're missing so much that you've worked so hard for. But God, your mom has to be like spinning her wheels. Just and it's so interesting that your neighbor is the one that kind of
Mhm,
came back and was like, how about this shot she got the day before she started getting sick? Because like,
mhm.
but I've had a similar experience where you're just like, because you're in it, like you and your mom and your family were in it. They were in the trenches, like trying to figure out what's going on. And because you've put your trust in these doctors that have thus far earned your trust, right? You've had the same pediatrician since you were a few days old. Like, you don't even account for that. You don't even think that that could be a part of it. And so then to for it to start to really look like it all of this is happening because of an unfortunately uninformed, not uninformed, but I mean, they did not uninformed on your part, but the doctor didn't do their due diligence. Now you're forced to kind of look at that and go, "Oh, like this isn't just some random illness that came on. Like this was like done to you almost."
Yeah, and it's so interesting because obviously I wrote the book, like you said, through my perspective. But now I'm a mom of 3, and my mom talks about the guilt that
Yeah.
she went through because she trusted everything. If it was on the CDC schedule, you did it.
Yeah.
And so to go, man, and of all vaccines, because, you know, we can get into the efficacy and all of that stuff and debate that there is with this vaccine. But the reality was and still is that I've did choose to only have one partner and my husband chose to only have me as a partner. So I was not sleeping around running an increased risk of acquiring HPV. And so my mom just felt like of all the vaccines, like I said no for years and then decided to get it and how I would argue she still struggles with that.
Sure,
And
she does. And I think, I know that some of the conversation, I was a little bit older when it came out. And so it bypassed me, but I had friends and close family members that were in that age range when it was coming out. And I know that some of the conversation around it was also, that what's like a small ear friendly way to say it would be like non-consensual activity, that it protects you in
mhm,
that circumstance. And I understand that. The question that I ask a lot just in life is like, at what cost?
mhm,
Right? So you were potentially protecting yourself from something that thankfully in your story never happened. And also, if it had happened, there's a lot of odds at play there that this vaccine even protects you from something that's going on. But then look what the actual outcome was. And so
Mhm.
I grieve for your mom. I think as a parent, I grieve for you
Mhm.
and the loss. And I know that like we've only told like the beginning of the story, and we're gonna get into
Mhm.
more of it, but I'm just thinking about your mom, like taking her active, bright, involved daughter to the bathroom. It
Mhm.
just makes my stomach hurt. And then the guilt layered on top of that once we start, discovering what it actually is. And one of the things that you wrote that really like hit me was you were writing a letter to your 17-year-old self, and you said you've become an experiment without wanting to be. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so one of the fun creative liberties to help, I think, cope with the emotions, the heaviness of writing this was I write three, well, I guess four letters in this book. The first one being in the first chapter where I write it as a letter. What would I say to my 17-year-old self? Preparing, because there I often think like, would there be benefit if God said, "Hey, you're about to face
Mm,
this really, really tough trial." And when we're in it, we don't get this timestamp. So I can see now, I can write and say, "Hey, you know what? It was hell on earth for 6 years. I didn't know if I was going to live through it. I didn't know if I was going to get married, have my own family, all of that. But I can say it was 6 years of hell. But in the moment, I had no idea. And one of the
mm,
things about this book is there were so many layers. So I ended up doing some treatment that did help my senior
mhm.
year. And then, so this is a little bit over a year after receiving the vaccine, and I'm finally back on my feet. I am just running with this. So my boyfriend at the time, now husband, his mom had said, "Hey, well, why don't you, since you've kind of exhausted all your medical options, why don't you go see our chiropractor? She's dealt with some patients that also said they had adverse vaccine reactions." So it became this layered situation of God bringing right people, right
Mhm.
time. And then I ended up through the same franchise in my hometown, a new practice opened up, and that chiropractor was fresh out of school, and his chiropractic mentor did his emphasis in toxicology, so studying how to
Mhm.
detox toxins out of the body. So he put together this whole protocol for me to follow, and I responded extremely well. And so I thought, it's all behind me. I'm going to go become a chiropractor too. I'm going to be this person for someone else. And about 8 months later, I got sick again, and it was actually worse than my senior year.
Mm.
So, my senior year, my parents were walking me to the bathroom. They'd let me do 5-minute cold showers because uh, heat can increase your chance of
Mhm.
syncope. And read in the book, a lot of times I'd go have that shower, doors unlocked in case I passed out. And I'd end up sitting on the bottom of the shower crying because I was still so dizzy. And it was so heartbreaking. Fast forward that to then when I have this setback, this would be my freshman year of college. First semester went great. I'm still going smooth. And I wake up one morning and I can't lift my head off my pillow.
Mm.
I was so much more disoriented. My mom had to bathe me at this
Oh.
point because I got to the point I could pass out sitting down. It didn't even have to be, let's walk Hannah to the bathroom. And I was so disoriented, and it's so frustrating. So I would pass out and I could be unresponsive for up to 2 hours, where I could hear people around me. I had to tell my mom, "Do not touch me, because if you touch me, I have shooting pain, fiery pain all throughout my body, pins and needles feeling." So I could hear my family around me, but I couldn't move. And you got to imagine now I can go, okay, I got out of that trial. But every single time that happened, I'm going, "Is this it? Is this
Right.
the time that I am no longer in 2 hours gonna be able to open my eyes again? Am I
And
just gonna"
let's remember you're 19.
Yeah.
You're like 18, 19.
Yeah.
Like I think about how difficult that would be as an adult with this, like, I like to believe I've got like a firm foundation in faith, you know, 18, 19, like having all of
Mhm.
this not only taken from you, but put on you. If we're honest, that is a recipe for bitterness, resentment, ugliness, giving up. Like you had every reason, I think still, every reason to decide like victory is not on the table for me. And like I'm just going to go ahead and succumb to my circumstances. And a lot of people do make that decision. And I'm going to be honest, I completely understand it. Like I
Mhm.
completely understand it. Do I like is that what's best for people? Is that what I want for people? Like obviously. No, but I think what's wild to me like listening to you tell your story and then having read parts of your story is even with that mindset what you were just saying of it got to the point where I was like is this it? Am I going to wake up? I don't did you struggle with, like, bitterness? Like, were you mad about it?
So, what's interesting is I would say this ended up being the darkest season of the whole 6 years. And the reason, because I say it's so much harder when you think a terrible trial's over to then be thrown into it, and then it's
100%.
worse.
Yes.
And so to add a
And you're like,
defense
"What the heck?" Like, we figured
Right.
it out. Like, I've gotten there with
Yeah,
anxiety before where I have
yeah.
these seasons of having huge panic attacks, and then you, like, figure out the pivot that you need to make, and God gives you clarity, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't had a panic attack in a year." And then you start having panic attacks again. You're like, "Oh my gosh,
Come
this
on.
is my final straw." So I totally get
Uh-huh.
that.
Well, and so to add context to this, I'm the oldest child. I've come from a blended family. At the time, there were 3 middle schoolers living in the house. So,
Mm.
on a very specific instance, there was one day where my 3 siblings were about to get off the middle school bus, and my mom said to my stepdad, "Hey, we should move her upstairs. She's already disoriented. There's no way she's going to be able to handle the noise of 3 middle schoolers coming home, being in the kitchen, trying to get snacks and all that." So my stepdad goes to, pick me up off the couch to carry me to my bedroom. And at that time, I went into this tonic like seizure like activity and passed out, fell onto the couch, all this. And that was another 2-hour episode where I could hear and not respond. Well, at that time, I went into that white tunnel. Like,
Mm.
so the near death experience that people talk about. And it was so interesting because as that's happening, the only conscious thought I had was, I'm going. I'm actually going.
Mm.
And we talk about feeling peace in this earth. Imagine peace, but there's no everything's whole. Like when you have that
Yeah.
experience, there's no form of misery or pain or any of that. So I'm seeing this blinding white tunnel. I start hearing footsteps. I'm thinking in my brain, I'm going, I'm actually going, but I don't know. Like it's interesting. I didn't remember being sick on the couch. I didn't remember any of that. I only had this thought of it's my time to go. Like I'm actually
Mhm.
going. And so I start to hear footsteps and I'm wondering like, okay, is Jesus coming to get me? What's going on? And right at that moment I get sent back into my body.
Mm.
And but it was a body that wasn't moving, a body that was shooting pain everywhere. And that's when I went in this dark spot because before I could say, I can tell I'm barely here. Like I knew it. It's weird.
Yeah.
I don't know how to even explain it. But then that happened. And so for weeks, if not more than a month with God, I was angry in the sense of I still believed in him, but it's that if I'm this close to dying, take me.
Yeah, like, what are we
I have
doing?
yeah, I mean, I told my mom, just let me go.
Oh,
And
and
I just
you're again, I know I keep making this point, but, like,
yeah.
you're so young. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
I cannot imagine as your mother. I can't imagine.
So my mom, so my it's funny, my mom's a little yeah, I'm very close with my mom. She gets flustered. I'm the calm one. She's the one that gets flustered. So in this scenario, I'm on the couch. Just put me out of my misery. Let me go. I'm done. Like I can tell I'm not here. I'm barely here. Just let me go. And she's pacing the living room. Do you hear what you're saying, Hannah? Do you hear what you're asking me to do? And I cannot even imagine. My parents debated having me sleep in between them because they were so
Yeah.
afraid of me passing away. And I
Yeah.
think I have never once put my kids to bed at night wondering if they'd wake up in the morning. And my parents did that every night for months and months and months on different seasons. Like, not
Yeah.
even just like, oh, it was just senior year. Oh, it was just freshman year of college. I mean, this kept happening. And I, I truly have such a respect, obviously, for my parents going through this, but it was also so obvious the emotional toll it's taking. I could
Yeah.
see it wearing on them without them feeling like they could communicate it.
Which probably added to the, like, "Oh, what are we doing, God?" Like,
Yeah.
not only am I miserable, the people around me are being worn thin, and so what pulls you out of that? Because the story has, like, a great not ending, but like, the
Yeah.
middle of it, because it's not ended, but, like, the middle of it gets really great.
Mhm. It is crazy because and awesome because each setback led me to different people, different information. So at this time where my mom's crying out, like
Yeah,
she's telling me let her go and I don't she's barely here. So what do I do? Well, my mom had gotten onto a Facebook group and reached out to parents who had also had kids with adverse reactions to Gardasil. And I'm originally from Ohio, and there is a mom local who reached out. Daughter was extremely similar case to mine and said, "Hey, have you done this, this, and this?" And one of the biggest things at that time was there's a precursor, L-histidine, precursor to histamine in this vaccine. Is she doing a low histamine diet? My We'd never heard about this. I'm thinking when my chiropractor tells me, swap your refined sugar for coconut sugar and honey and sweet potatoes instead of white potatoes and avocado everything, that I'm being healthy. And then come to find out in my specific situation, strawberries, avocado, citrus, all these things, certain anything fermented. You're told eat all these fermented
right?
foods, it'll help your gut. Well, they're all high histamine. So then you have someone with my specific medical condition, and it was crazy. I mean, coffee is a high histamine.
Yeah, oh,
So
man.
there,
It's
oh,
it's a
yeah,
lot.
it's
It's
a
a lot
lot
of
of
good stuff.
foods. It's a lot of chocolate. I mean,
Yep,
come on, rude.
yep. So
So,
histamine also has a connection to anxiety responses.
anxiety. So add that stress
Mhm.
releases histamine. So when I had my setback, I was burning myself out on school,
Yep.
working two part-time jobs that were demanding,
Girl.
and I had a sinus infection, trifecta.
Yep.
So talk about every time I got a sinus infection, the anxiety I went through.
Yeah.
And you're talking to someone who before this and just my demeanor, I'm not an anxious person, but
Mhm.
then I went through this with this and these sickness. If someone around me was sick, so my brother comes home sick, and I mean, it took years. Anytime I got sick, I had a setback.
Yeah.
Simple viral infection, and I went down hard, passing
Yeah.
out, food reactions, you name it. And even as I was starting to recover, and one of the things that works for and against me in my story is I have this personality where I'm just going to get back up and I'm
Yeah.
going to push myself. And I say it's a blessing and a curse
Mhm.
because there are times that I should have been resting, that I was,
Mhm.
no, I'm going to do this.
But it also
But
kept you in the fight. It
it
also,
did.
like, and I think a
It
lot of
did.
people lose their fight, and they, like we were kind of talking about earlier, they succumb to things. So look,
Mhm.
you're talking to a lifelong recovering hustler. like I have pushed myself to the brink of burnout without all of these other variables so many times. But then there's also the part of me that's like, yeah, but also like it takes a lot to take me out. And I'm gonna keep
Mhm.
pushing and trusting God and like doing the thing, you know. So I think that
Mhm.
there's definitely that is a double edged that is the epitome of a double-edged sword for sure. Is
Yes.
that kind of that drive and that mental state.
It is, and so I did a lot of different treatments and met different professionals along the way, and in my story, what people will see is each layer provided progress, but I was still having setbacks. So, one of the cool things that happened is as I was recovering enough, my husband had already transferred at the time we were dating, had already transferred to Lipscomb University, or sorry, not transferred. He did his 4 years at Lipscomb in Nashville, Tennessee, which is a private Christian school. I had stayed and did community college while I was doing all these treatments. And so, which, you know what, ended up being its own blessing because they did an inaugural honors program that I got to be a part of. It was these tight knit classes. I
Oh,
met
that's
my
cool.
best friend my first day of class, and
Oh,
it just
yeah.
little
God can use
things.
anything.
He can. And so I did treatment for 2 years, got where I felt comfortable to transfer. Doors opened, right? All these things, getting certain scholarship that helped me be able to afford it and all. And 6 weeks in, I had a crash. So I was doing thriving. So I majored in biology with chemistry and nutrition minors. So I was taking these classes, but I'm super passionate about it. I don't really care that the professors walk in and try to scare you about, oh, we're gonna expect graduate level work, whatever. Bring it on. It is so funny. I have that personality because when I transferred, the head of the chemistry department looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Well, get ready to give up your 4.0." And I proved him wrong. Even with all these setbacks, I still somehow
Yeah.
got a 4.0 off college. And not that that is what matters when you get to heaven, but it shows that fight and
Yes.
determination. And I've always been that person that if I'm going to do it, I want to excel at it. This
Yep.
mediocrity stuff, not for me. So if that means I need to do less things, I'm going to do less things, but I will excel at what I'm going to do. And so I was actually reflecting before we got on this morning. Talk about family, you talk about my wonderful husband. They were key players in this
Yeah.
story. But what's so neat too, I mean, the biology department at Lipscomb rallied. I had to be wheelchaired to and from classes in certain semesters. And I had the nurse practitioner telling me, Hannah, you haven't gone to class in 2 weeks. You don't get in there, you're losing your classes again because I had to take multiple medical leaves throughout college. And so I go and second class in, passed out in class. And then,
Mm.
my husband worked for campus security, so he'd come, he'd wheelchair like, get me in a
But like
wheelchair, then
even
pop me in
that,
the
like
golf
that he
cart.
worked for campus security, like come on,
I
God, that's
mean,
adorable.
yes, and so we made relationships with a lot of people, and everyone cheered me on. It was so heartbreaking to transfer there, thinking, "I'm doing better, I got this." And finally, because mind you, my husband and I were doing, at that time, long distance relationship.
Right.
I'm in Ohio, he's in Tennessee. And and that was 2 years of doing that, and so we're so excited, we're finally at the same college together, and I'm making all these new friends and loving life, and 6 weeks in, I had been being so careful about everything I was eating, and I said, "Oh, I just want their stir fry, it smells so good, I wanna have some." Major histamine reaction. So my
Yeah.
hand, when I go through this, I get partial paralysis where my hand would lock up like this, and I could move my arm, but I couldn't move any of my fingers, and I'd have shooting pains. Well, it did this, and this is one of the cases where I pushed myself and I shouldn't have. My mom's telling me, "Tomorrow's Friday, do not go to class, sleep the weekend, see if you're better." I'm dumb. I set my alarm the next morning, pass out in the second class I'm in. So, and it just spiraled, and to the point where my parents are saying, "You pass out at school one more time, we're coming to get you." And
Yeah.
sure enough, I did. I passed out, and that was a whole different ordeal because I had firefighters and EMTs come, and the firefighter just thought I was having your typical college anxiety attack. So I'm unresponsive, and he's hitting my chest. I can't tell you the pain I was going through. And my boyfriend at the time was saying, "You're not taking her medical history into account. She has had this adverse reaction. It can take her up to 2 hours." He's like, "This is an anxiety attack," and just pounding on me.
Also, like, how is that helpful for an anxiety attack, like, in the first place?
I don't know. Apparently, it's like a really hard sternum rub is what he was going for. I don't. I'm not someone who had anxiety attacks to know
Right.
the difference with that.
I'm
All I
telling
can
you
tell.
that if somebody beat on my chest while I was having a panic
Oh,
attack, I'd probably punch them in the throat, so
oh my goodness. Well, I couldn't move.
You couldn't,
I
but
couldn't
I
move.
could.
Oh man, I had a New Yorker roommate in there just like chewing them out. And not naturally my parents are gonna be mad. So my
Yeah.
dad's calling in a complaint as he's driving down to come get me. And so that adds a different layer. So now again, I'm like, I can do this. I can just take a week at home. Well, one of the associate directors at the university called my parents and said, "Hey, she's got to drop all but one
Ugh.
class because she's got like I think three sciences, and we can't recreate the labs for her."
Having an ultrasound doubles the chance a mother will choose life. So, a woman walks into an abortion clinic planning to have an abortion, usually scared and alone. Preborn will give them a free ultrasound. And in that moment, when women see their baby on the screen and hear a heartbeat, everything changes. This year alone, over 38,000 babies have been rescued through Preborn's work. And they don't stop there. They care for the mother holistically. They provide counseling, classes, ongoing financial aid up until 2 years after the baby is born. So you can be the hero behind saving a life by giving $28 to sponsor an ultrasound, giving a mother a chance to see her baby and choose life. Go to preborn.com/speakeasy. That's preborn.com/speakeasy and give a gift, save a life, be the first voice of hope she hears.
My husband and I, at the time we were dating, we this is our first time not doing long distance for a couple years with college. And so now I'm going home, having to drop my classes
Yeah.
again. And I was so, I can keep them. I can do this. I'll figure it out. But I had three sciences. They can't recreate labs. So it just was a whole lot of money lost, an entire
Yeah.
semester of tuition and all that. Feeling like a burden again, feeling like, what what am I doing here? I am so committed. I want to go get my degree. I want to go get my doctorate. How do I do that if I keep having these setbacks in undergrad? And you add a layer to that, being in a serious relationship, you know, at the time my boyfriend's telling me, I need you to rest." Like, he was so stressed, but I knew he was going and talking with our friends about it and not me, and that
Mm.
hurt because he's like,
Mm.
I can't add stress to you." And it
Yeah.
just was that I can't even be the person I'm supposed to be for him, and I went through such this honestly feeling like dead weight, like, "Why are you even I love you, I wanna marry you, but why are you even still with me? I'm gonna
Yeah.
drag you down our whole life," is how I felt. And I went through all this of wanting to pursue marrying this person, but going, "Is this our life?"
Mm.
I just felt like a liability, even
Well, and you're like, "This is
the
my life. Do I have to make this your life too?" You know?
Mhm. Yeah, and so there's plenty of ways that I made my mom cringe over the years because I'd still be having setbacks, and I told my mom, "I'm gonna go over to Austria for a couple weeks with with a friend." And my now husband, he had double majored, and one of his majors was German. So he had done a semester abroad, which originally we wanted to do together. I had setbacks. I didn't get to go. So he said, "Well, I'm going to do another Maymester. Could you come over with some friends for, you know, 2 weeks?" So I'm still passing out. My mom is like, "You have lost your
Hannah.
mind. You have lost your mind." But one of the things that was really cool, I like I said, I'm a bit of a nerd. So, and actually enjoy reading PubMed articles. And so I had come across one about IV saline solutions improving POTS conditions. And so I had been diagnosed with POTS, and I started weekly IV infusions. and I stopped passing out. And I actually went over to Austria feeling great, doing
That's
great. And
amazing.
yeah, so it was lined up really well. I
Yeah.
had months of that. And talk about crazy. I mean, the number of times I have brought up to a medical professional, I had a severe adverse reaction to this vaccine, specifically HPV vaccine.
Mhm.
And I'm going and getting these weekly IV infusions, and the nurse is telling me, I really think this is going to help you. We have another girl that had an adverse reaction to Gardasil, and she is responding really well to this too. And so there's little things like that. And for me, it did help substantially. And so I ended up going to Austria. My husband proposed on that trip. And so we had been
Oh.
together 4 years. And I was finally doing well. I mean, but then I had more setbacks when we were dating. And it's just that,
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, engaged. And I'm going, we're supposed to get married. And I'm still dropping classes. I'm still wondering, how am I going to graduate college? How is he going to take care of me? And then you start thinking about the finances of all
Yeah.
these treatments that I'm doing. I look back now, like, I don't know how my parents did it. And then to go, okay, and is he like, we're going to start
Right, like,
taking
we're
this
gonna take
on?
that on, yeah.
So it was a lot. But one of the beauty parts to this is that, I go through all these specialists, go through all these treatments, all this up and down, and like I said, that fear, even when shortly after getting married, fearing setbacks, fearing that next sinus infection that could, send me to passing out again. I don't, I didn't fully understand it at the time, but one of the things I only put, mind you, a lot of this book is tailored, right? So it's maybe a tenth of my journal entries that
Yeah.
I wrote through the years that I polished into what I could share. There's only one chapter where I put like authentic broken. It reminds me of the Psalms, like pouring my heart into
Yeah.
these journal entries of this pain and this suffering and these questions. And for whatever reason, during that season, I wrote, God, somehow I just know that when I get pregnant with my first child, that is my sign that these Gardasil days are over and I'm walking into a new season. That's 2015. So fast forward, my husband and I get married in 2018. We're thinking we're gonna wait years, and I ended up getting pregnant 6 weeks in, which was
Oops.
oh yeah, big oops. Mind you, we are 22. Okay, we
Yeah.
are broke as can be.
Yeah.
I had still been having like little health issues, but nothing major at this time. I'm still in college because I've had to take medical leaves.
Yeah.
So he graduated, I'm in school, and I mean, it's so funny because I'm thinking my nausea is because I'm taking 5 sciences with 3 labs, right? I'm working
I'm
and I'm taking
stressed.
5 sciences. It's just stress, like, it's not this. So I don't even tell my husband that I'm gonna take a pregnancy test because 'cause I'm that convinced it's not gonna be positive. And so you know, take the test. It's early in the morning. I don't even turn a light on. I just take the flashlight on my phone and walk up and see the 2 lines and pick it up, and I just start shaking.
Yeah.
And it's so funny, how telling my husband and all that stuff. Well, in that season, God kept putting on my heart, "You're going to walk into motherhood and you're gonna write this memoir." And I write in the book, I thought those things were separate. Motherhood,
Mm.
memoir. And I my daughter, I couldn't have done it without her because this was so emotional to even to this day, this is 12 years past. When I got my first hard copy of this book, it takes me about 60 pages to be able to push past the emotions of, and it really is just, I'm reading about a trial that's starting that I didn't know I was walking into. Kind of that phrase that
Mm.
you were talking about. I became this experiment without wanting to be one. I had no idea. It was so naive that I didn't even have an idea that vaccine reactions happen.
Right.
And I walk through this and I have, some medical professionals that were dismissive and it's in your head, it's hysteria. I had some that were silent and not returning phone calls. And then I had these other honest, really respectful medical professionals, whether it's in the emergency room that I kept frequently going to, that would say, I'm really sorry you're going through this. Hey, I went and looked online. This does match the post marketing reports of severe
Yeah.
adverse reactions. I just don't know what to do with you. The number of times I had a doctor look at me and say, I'm sorry, I just don't know what to do with you. And
Yeah.
it was so much better than the you're hysterical. But at the same time, it brought these questions of we're not training doctors to look for vaccine reactions. We're
No.
not making them read the inserts,
Yeah, we're
first
not
of all. And
educating
you
them about the vaccine in the first place, much less they can't not the reactions for sure.
right. It's so, and I mean, I sat through virology and all these classes, and you watch the documentaries and about these viruses and smallpox and look at polio and all this stuff. And here's this vaccine. And it just creates this situation of, man, what do parents do? What do you think? How can we respond? Because how am I supposed to trust these
Yeah.
recommendations when there's, I mean, if you're going to be silent when someone has a reaction that they're telling you about. And that's not to
Or
say that
even
every
worse than the silence is the gaslighting, right?
Mhm.
Is the like, no, it's not, they're not related. That happens to a lot of people. And so I think it's kind of a mess either way you spin it.
Mhm.
And like there I even because even the doctors or medical professionals that will admit there's an issue, exactly what you said. I don't know what to do with you.
Mhm.
So it's
Yep.
like either which way, whether they gaslight you, they ignore you, or they acknowledge it, the ones that acknowledge it don't know how to help.
Mhm.
Think about
It's a
how many
mess.
like secondary kind of like alternative methods you ended up having to find, how much research ends up being the burden of the person that's like the victim of the reaction. It all
Mhm.
falls on that person to find ways to get better because the system's completely failed them.
Mhm. It and that's a lot, that's one of the layers. So obviously I wrote this book because I want people to see God's goodness and bringing
Yeah.
the right people at the right time and walking through this extreme situation. And one of the worst things and the best things was all I could do was lay on a couch. So
Mm,
it really forced me to lay there, to pray, to go, why am I here? But also have this conviction early on in the first couple of years where God would put on my heart, you're going to tell people about this. You're going to write this book. And it was this push. And, but there were also crazy, awesome things that happened where you're going, so one of those situations being I talk about when went to Lipscomb, but then got sent home from passing out. I had this nightmare, and when I woke up from the nightmare, it was crazy because it was about my husband and boyfriend at the time, and I like shot up in bed. And it's interesting. It's like God laid before me in this flash shot, like in a millisecond, every positive memory that I had
mm,
of my boyfriend, and and I heard the audible voice of God telling me, like, that you guys are destined for each other, you're gonna push each other to your destiny, that iron strengthens iron, and it was a 2-hour conversation, and now I don't go into, all of it because a lot of it was I came from a blended family with a lot of messy situations, but what I wanted people to see was 2 things. During that conversation, God repeatedly told me, and it's interesting, it's so hard to know how to describe it because it's like the cross of the
mhm,
whisper of the Holy Spirit, but a person talking in the room, but it's like the whole room, you hear it. But over and over, God kept saying, "Daughter, I'm always with you." Because he
mm,
knew that my thing was, don't leave me. Like I'm
mhm,
having this amazing, crazy experience that where I'm awake for it. And we're talking like this, and it's cool. Like, God, you know, God was talking to me about the ways, like, how he straight up said, "How amazing is your grandma and all these things that she does for my kingdom." And I got to call my grandma and be like, "God
God thinks you're
is
doing
talking to
awesome.
me
Yeah.
about how amazing you are." And I get to go through life, 1, nobody can convince me God doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But 2, like, don't you wanna live a life where God is looking at you saying, "That person's amazing. That person's moving my kingdom forward.
Yeah.
That person's gonna let me take this pain that they've gone through and use it for purpose, not get stuck in it." And so it was moments, extreme moments like this, that are the only way, because sometimes I'm like, "Well, God, why do I have to be different?" 1, I got this adverse reaction, but 2, like, I haven't met anybody else that's heard God's voice. I've read accounts online because I was kind of curious to see, do people say similar things,
Yeah.
but at that time, like, the most beautiful thing happened because uh God, in this 2-hour conversation, knew that the only thing that was convincing me that I was going to live was that I was going to marry my husband and have a family one day. That was the only thing. I'm like, I am going to be a mom. Like, we're going to get
Yeah.
married, we're going to have kids. And in that conversation, God asked me, "Do you want to hear your children's voices?" And I said, "Yes." And I saw this playhouse, and I didn't see their faces, but I heard 3 distinct voices laughing and playing.
Mhm.
And, what's absolutely insane about this, and you can go, "Oh my goodness, God, like, weaving things together." I had gave birth to my 3rd baby, never told anybody what this playhouse looked like. About a month after I had my 3rd baby, my father-in-law says, "Hey, I'm going and picking up this playhouse today to put on our property." It's the exact same one. I just started
But
crying.
that like but also that like your story is so reflected in so much of like biblical history. Like think about the people who heard the voice of God, who communed with him, who he gave visions to. They suffered
Mhm,
greatly often. And I think that when we are handed a light, like we're all handed suffering. It's a guarantee. Like scripture doesn't say if, it says when, right? But
mhm,
it's it really does bolster your ability to walk through that. And I really think the
mhm,
only way that people like you who have been through things like that, like and I know that this is essentially the basis of the book is it really is only possible with God. Like it
mhm,
really is. And look, let's give the qualifier. That doesn't mean that you're gonna have visions or that you're gonna hear the
mhm,
audible voice of God. God speaks to us all differently. And also I think our in our flesh and in our modern context, we can struggle to hear him more than ever, I think, right now.
mhm,
But when I hear your story and when I know what I know of what you've walked through, but how you've walked through it, and the fact is that like you give all of the glory to God. That the only
mhm,
reason that you didn't allow bitterness and resentment and the darkness to win, that you didn't give up was because you had the foundation of a Christian faith. And that but that it's reflected in your story. That doesn't mean that you didn't have seasons where you were like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like this is
Oh,
not
yeah.
I can't, that you weren't
Mhm,
on your face, I think is a testament, right? Like this is your testimony. This is a testament to the fact that yes, like even in this, even in the midst of all of this, joy is possible. And
mhm,
like walking through this and allowing it, like I love that from an early age you were like, I'm going to tell this story. I'm going to I, from the very beginning of this podcast, I've described it as like people who have walked through the fire coming back with buckets of water for the people that are still in it. And I think that
mm,
that's what you're doing, is saying like you had every odds stacked against you, against your choice, that really like should have taken you out, but God.
mhm. Well, and it's so interesting too because trying to figure out how to write this book because it's
Yeah.
such a heavy one, it's emotional to go through it, but it's extremely politicized now. It's
Polarizing.
polarizing. You just say the word vaccine
Yep.
and wow. And it's so interesting because as I was praying through, okay, well, how do I write about this? What do I do? You know, God kept saying, I need you to hold the tension
Yeah.
of this medical mystery. Like, I'm not taking this stance. I'm not telling people what to do about vaccines. I'm trying to stay in my lane, mostly with the HPV vaccine, because it just does seem to have a higher adverse
Yep.
reaction rate to it. And there are some big questions to ask, but I'm not coming out swinging at the vaccine program because I think there's
I don't know if that really like for some people that accomplishes things, but it can make it harder for people to hear your story and hear your heart. And I think you've done a
yeah.
really beautiful job of that. And I thought like the tension. I've thought that so many times, like preparing for this episode and throughout this episode, you are holding the tension to me of this happened to you and it is real. And I know that there are people that, I mean, you told the story. There are so many people that try to discount this very real experience, but you're trying to point to God.
Mhm.
You're not trying to position yourself as a victim, even though like you really kind of are one, you know, that like there's so much tension. And I appreciate like, look, your girl's gonna swing about some vaccines. Like I am, and I have, and I will continue
Yeah.
to. But I have learned over the years of doing that that there are some conversations to be had, and it's hard to have conversations when you're swinging.
Mhm. Right, and that's where I think this is uncomfortable to me to try and say, "Okay, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna be willing to hold the tension." Because I write in there, there was a season of my life where to me, you would call me anti-vaccine. Everything about vaccines is garbage. And then I walked through the season of going, okay, can we make more robust studies? Can we figure out,
Mhm.
are we giving too many? Is there, because we've protected the pharmaceutical companies from a product that makes billions of dollars. And so
That
you have
part.
like just this year alone, I told my husband, I said, I was just kind of curious how much was getting spent on Gardasil advertising. And in March and April of 2025 alone, $26 million. dollars.
Mhm.
2 months out of this past year, $26 million. dollars. And you go, okay, this is a conflict of interest because they're doing the safety studies. And, you know, I only go into the science of it really in the second to last chapter. I write this letter to Gardasil and I say, let's
Mhm.
have an open and honest conversation. Here's what I'm wrestling with, right? And so, one of the things, and I'm only going to pull out this one quote here because I think it applies so much. So here we go. Information parents are most likely to see is that from pre-vaccine era to 2015 to 2018, there was an 88% decrease in the four strains targeted by the HPV vaccine among teen girls and an 81% decrease in young women. The fancy way to say this is the data indicates a significant decline in HPV vaccine type prevalence. The information less likely to be shared is in 2005, prior to your release on the market, 12,803 new cervical cancer cases and 3,924 cervical cancer deaths were reported. In 2006, 10 years after your release, 13,338 new cervical cancer cases and 4,188 cervical cancer deaths were reported. So, are you really making the situation better? It
Mm.
looks to me like you're lowering the prevalence of the strains within you, but creating a pocket for other strains to surface that may or may not be more virulent. The result? Total cases of cervical cancer and deaths are not significantly dropping. And that's part of the conversation we have to have is lowering cervical cancer, lowering HPV infections and lowering cervical cancer cases and deaths. That's a noble cause.
Mhm.
But you have a vaccine with a higher reaction rate that's not
It's
it's
not
not
doing it.
showing up. It's not showing up.
The math is
You're
not
taking
mathing.
it's not mathing. You have roughly, the same amount of infections each year and deaths each year. And this vaccine now next year will hit 20 years. It's not accomplishing what it set out to do. It's noble, like I said, to try and help the situation, but you also add the layer of having a successful pap smear program that we can encourage people to do.
Mhm.
And you go, it's really hard with this specific vaccine not to feel like it's on the market for financial reasons because
And
it's
I think a
making so
lot of
much
people
money.
feel that way about a lot of the vaccines, just to be
Mhm.
clear. I mean, I know I
Yeah.
do, and I appreciate your, more middle of the road stance, but there's,
It's harder to have, but I'm willing to sit there. I love to say because I did major in biology and I sat through these virology classes and stuff like this, and I enjoy research. I'm happy to hold this tension and say, give me robust studies and show me this shouldn't be a problem. I'm happy to change my mind.
yeah,
I don't expect to change my mind.
yeah,
I expect that when you look at how this vaccine study was done with Gardasil, and you see that in the very beginning for stuff like pain at the injection site and stuff like that, you have three groups shown. You have the HPV vaccine itself, Gardasil. You have the adjuvant, which was AAHS, and then you have a saline placebo. And you see that for the minor conditions listed. But
right.
then you get into the autoimmune conditions. All of a sudden, you get two groups. You get vaccine group and adjuvant group or saline placebo combined. And, I write this to the vaccine of going, how do you expect me not to think you're covering up by showing, hey, both of them had quite a bit of a reaction, but we don't need to be concerned about it? That's not true. And one of my professors in college, he did his postdoc in immunology. And I love writing about our conversations in the book because we'd sit there and we'd have conversation and say, I'm concerned about aluminum being in vaccines, and here's why. And he'd say, I'm not concerned about aluminum in vaccines, and here's why. And it ended up getting to this point of this really beautiful stance where I had sent him this massive peer reviewed out of the Cochrane collaboration of independent researchers. They've reviewed all these studies on this aluminum adjuvant in the HPV vaccine. And their conclusion was at this time, you could argue either way based on studies, whether this aluminum adjuvant is a problem or not. At this time, we do not know. And I
Mhm.
think that needs to be that tension to hold of I sure have a reason to be biased to thinking it is a problem. You've been told your whole life that it's so minor, we
Mhm.
don't need to be concerned that he has that bias. And if we can just uh, wherever God takes us, like I just want to be known that like God, I will go wherever you
Yeah,
want me to go with this. I'm going to share this story. I will do whatever needs done with research. I mean, I'm in a season of young kids right now, so I say that I go, oh, the seasons of life, but I will go back. Tell me I need to get my doctorate in immunology. I'll figure it out. Like,
yeah,
you know, I want to see right now. I take my kids to the pediatrician feeling like the science is anything but settled. I feel like
100%.
there's so much gaslighting right now and so much just ignorant talk too of like acting like you can give as many vaccines as you want because we're exposed to microbes all day long, but you're injecting a virus with an antigen and other products to be able to deliver it as an injection into the bloodstream. It's not something that's sitting on my apple that I take a bite of. And so to
Right.
act like it's the same thing is absurd. And then to act like parents are off base for questioning this. What I'm seeing now is this serious mistrust because you
Mm.
have more situations of people like me who previously had done every vaccine going,
Mhm.
okay, well, now what do I think? How am I supposed to trust you when you're not studying the cumulative schedule and all its effects? And I hate it for this generation of parents right now because there's arguing on both sides. There's
Yes.
pro vaccine, your kid's gonna be really sick or could possibly die if you don't get the vaccines. Then there's on the other side, parents saying, you're taking more of a risk with this vaccine. You could have they could get a neurodevelopmental disorder or in some cases death and all this stuff. And these the majority of Americans are in the middle, just paralyzed,
Yeah.
not knowing what do I do? And so it's a conversation that needs had. And
Yes.
I hope that I can be kind of this voice that has this unique position I can hold because I walked through the trenches. It's still hard to think about being unresponsive, hearing people say my name with shooting pains through my body, not knowing if I'm going to be able to open my eyes, not knowing if I'm going to wake up in the morning. I used to have nightmares almost every night, not because I was so stressed out, but because I physically was so sick. I had so much pain in my abdomen. I would have stabbing dreams regularly
Mm.
and wake
Mhm.
up and go, oh, yeah, my
It
abdomen's
was
just
just a
hurting
dream.
again.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
just
and
a
I
dream.
think you just really, like, summed up where so many people are landing, and there are people that are in those 2 camps, and I think most people know where I land. But for the people who are in the middle, I think listening to your story and you also having, like, the scientific backing and understanding, I think is gonna be super beneficial. And so I am so thankful for you sharing not just your story, but your wisdom and how God used all of it. And I think people should get your book. Like people should read your story. Stories are powerful and they allow us to draw into other people's experiences. And maybe there's people on either side of the debate that will be able to maybe see like and understand a little bit the other side by
Mhm.
reading it. And so I'm so thankful for your time. This was so great.
Well, thank you for having me on. I've been super, super excited to share this and hopefully bring light in a positive way that people can see, okay, God is awesome. Let's hear about the things that he's doing, but let's also hear about how there's this injustice going on that
Yeah.
needs addressed. And
Yeah.
it needs a whole lot more listening and respect in this conversation, not just turning away, ignoring it, arguing about it. It's not productive. And our generation, our kids' generations, and going forward, they deserve better than that.
Yeah. Totally.